And you're watching Q&A, and remember, you can send your web or video questions to our website. The address is on the screen. Like this video question uploaded by Ashley Lay from Melbourne.
To John Marsden, you have said that the enemy in the Tommorow series is unknown, but to many readers of the Tommorow series, the enemy resembles Asian, if not Chinese, characteristics. Can you confirm tonight the true identity of the enemy in the Tommorow series? Thanks.
John Marsden.
It's the one question I've never answered because I don't want people to use the books to justify some kind of racist belief they might hold. So I don't want people saying, yeah, we knew we could never trust those Latvians or those Algerians or those Peruvians or whatever. They might, whatever...
Can I just interrupt here, because if I'm correct, if I've read the publicity correctly, they're making a film.
That's true.
Of this book. Yep. So what... Well, a lot of people are going to want to see that film, but you're hardly going to be able to make them unknown. They have to assume some sort of ethnic identity for the film. So what ethnic identity are they going to assume in the film?
I've heard they're Tasmanian. Confirm or deny, please, John.
Only a Tasmanian is allowed to get away with questions like that, so you're in a privileged position. I don't want to preempt the producers and what they plan for the movie, but they are going to give the invaders a definite ethnic identity. So, yeah, that's their choice, and I have no input to that. But at the same time, yeah, there's always been that fear in Australia of some sort of influx or threat from the north. So that does mean Asia, I guess.
Well, indeed, and there are plenty of hints. After all, I think you dedicated the last book to the people of Tibet, East Timor and West Papua, incidentally all places invaded by Chinese or Indonesians.
Yeah,
that's a bit of a hint, right?
There are a few hints like that in the book, but really, I mean, that dedication could have been to any country that's been overrun by any kind of invading force. It's, yeah, the real issue to me in the book is how Australian young people in the 21st century would react given a terrible and pressing challenge or danger. There is a belief that modern young people are soft, that they will kind of just go to water when anything dangerous or threatening happens in their lives. And that's not what I've noticed about them, so I wanted to bring that out rather than concentrate on...
OK, but I'm just going to press you a little bit more on this, because I discovered a little corner of the academic world that's fascinated by this question, and they raised the issue of whether or not using a racial type as an invader in Australia actually can create xenophobia, the very thing you're worried about exactly. And they pick up on your use of words to describe the invaders as locusts and plagues, the description of them as cunning, fierce, well-organised, etc., etc. And they claim that this is drawn from overtly racist vocabulary from the Federation-era invasion texts. Now, I appreciate that's an academic work, but people are looking at your sort of books in this light. What do you say to them?
I normally get interviewed on book shows by very gentle interviewers who don't put this sort of pressure on, but you've been interviewing politicians, obviously, and I'm under the hammer now. It's hard. There's hardly been any country in history that's gone more than a generation without being invaded. Australia's gone 200 years now without being invaded, although we came pretty close in 1942. So it's not unreasonable for us to look around and consider that there could be some future danger to us, as every country in the world should look around and consider their local environment. Now, we are in that kind of Asian-Pacific region, so I think it's not unreasonable to look around like that. And, of course, whenever someone invades you, you want to characterise them in terms that will be comfortable for you to justify your response to them, and you'll see them as a pernicious and, ugly and destructive force. So I don't think any of that is unexpected or could be considered unreasonable when you're writing about a war and an army that's kind of overrunning your country.
Yeah, I mean, I hasten to add, my children have listened to these books on long car rides across the country and enjoyed them enormously, as have I. But, I mean, it does raise these interesting questions. And I think the film will raise even more interesting questions, because you're going to see, physically, Asians invading Australia. It's going to be quite controversial.
You're assuming it's an Asian...
Well, I think you more or less confirmed that, didn't you?
No, I said that the producers were assigning a particular cultural... But anyway, yes.
All right, Jeff Gallup.
Well, look, I remember age 16 reading a book by character called Russell Braddon, The Year of the Angry Rabbit, which raised exactly these issues for me as a youngster. I don't think John can escape from the politics of this. You know, normally you would say, well, OK, he's an author and he's writing a book and he's creating an imaginary situation to illustrate a point. But, you know, deep within Australian history, of course, we have, we've had this very, very strong racist undercurrent. And in terms of Asia, and remember the perception that Asia has of these issues, if I can use that term very generally, was, of course, of Western imperialism and colonialism defined by race coming into, and in many cases, of course, controlling those countries. And the Chinese feel this very, very strongly, that for 2 centuries, you know, they were treated as an inferior people. And there's a lot of resentment about these sorts of issues. So I think it is, if Australia is to live with Asia, which we have to because it's our geographical location, bringing race into the question of, you know, what may or may not be a question of the invasion of Australia is quite dangerous and evokes the very images in Asia that we don't want to have of Australia. Okay. So I don't think John can escape from the politics of it, even though writing a book, I know, requires imagination, etc. John,
it's not about race, it's about national identity, which is a different thing entirely.
Well, I don't think it is, actually. Nationalism, as a current, is a very dangerous force in our modern world. And I think if you look at China, the one thing we don't want to happen in China is rabid nationalism. We saw rabid nationalism feed, you know, Japanese imperialism in the 1930s. So, you know, this concept of nationalism is a very dangerous one.
Let's hear John respond to that, and we have someone in the audience who wants to get involved.
As a writer, one of the things that I know and that I've found as writing these books is that the great advantage of setting your book in a war theatre is that everything will be more intense. So characters who fall in love in wartime will be much more interesting than characters who fall in love in any other context. Characters who have an argument with each other, friends who fall out. In a war, in the theatre of war, that's far more powerful and intense. So as a novelist, that's kind of my first priority, my first interest.
Let's hear from audience.
Hi, I've got a question for John. Your book, The Rabbits, is obviously about England's invasion of Australia. Why is it okay for that to be so obvious that these rabbits, you know, because they're English, but yet it's not okay for you to make any other race in the world
No, not at all.
identifiable?
That's not, I don't accept that at all. You use that word obviously, but that's a word that I kind of always raises hackles on with me. It's not obvious at all. The rabbits is a metaphor for any situation where an invading force invades and conquers and colonises another country. So it's nothing to do with Britain in particular, although it's it looks like an Australian context in which this is happening. But no, I don't think that it characterises British people any more than Tommorow, when the war began, might characterise Chinese or Asian or any other.
Sophie, do you want to say something on this?
I was quite shocked by Jeff's reaction. It seemed like something from, you know, the cultural wars of 20 years ago. There's nothing wrong with being proud of your country. And what are we going to do now? Have a manifesto and double-check what authors are writing. Let's be so politically correct. Let's not identify or possibly look at any race to invade Australia. Let's make them, you know, aliens. You know, is that going to offend someone? I mean, let's allow artists and authors the freedom to write. In the Tommorow series...
And others the freedom to criticise.
Absolutely. But... This book series has had an extraordinary impact on so many young people, including my 14-year-old stepdaughter, who hasn't read as much as long as I've known her.
But don't you think we have a responsibility when we use the term national identity to put content into it? Australia's national identity around issues like a democratic system of government, a system of freedoms that underpin our society, a belief that we can live together with different religions and different cultures. You know, to me, that's a much stronger concept and sustainable concept.
I'm just going to interrupt there because, having read the books, I would say that they're much more subtle than what you're depicting.
Although I do, Tony, refer to page 203, John. The invaders eat Peking duck. Over to you.
I'll ask Melinda to come in on this because I haven't heard from you on this subject.
Look, I haven't read the book, and I don't like commenting on things I haven't read, but in the 5 minutes I've known John, I really can't imagine that that is your intention. I just
No, and in fact, I don't think in any of my books is the name Australia even mentioned, perhaps once or twice in that series, because I'm not into national pride at all. So I don't want Australians getting jingoistic about...
It's true, your characters are very far from jingoistic, and that is one of the interesting things about them, and drawn from a series of different ethnic backgrounds, I might add.
Yeah, I want them to have a universality. That's more important to me.
Okay, we're going to move on. You're watching